Recording on this computer. Done. Hey, welcome guys. Good to have you all with us for our final Zoom session for semester 2, 2019. Man, this goes fast, doesn't it? Maybe it hasn't gone fast for you, I don't know. But anyway, it's good to have you with us, and it certainly feels like things are starting to wind up around here. And so tonight we've just got a bit of a Zoom session. We're going to talk about specifically Module 3 for the unit Lifestyle Medicine Past, Present, Future. And in this unit we've been talking about the different elements, the different components to lifestyle medicine. So just to recap on the module, first of all we just looked at the sort of the historical context of lifestyle medicine. That was Module 1. Then you guys got to present that and influence your local communities with it and your friends, and they got to hear about it. And then we did a bit of a SWOT analysis to see what we thought in terms of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats of lifestyle medicine. And then in this last module, we've been looking at really the elements, what are the components of lifestyle medicine? Because it's actually very broad, and we looked at, we had Gary Yeager, who's obviously an absolute legend in the field, and he has his, what's he call it now? Nasty odors with malice. And so he has this sort of acronym, he loves acronyms, Gary does. And he's got this acronym with a whole heap of different things in that he felt are the components or the ingredients, the elements of lifestyle medicine. We also talk about some people have been a bit tighter on what they think they are. And I've got this book here. This is the Undo It. This is Dean Ornish's latest one. And I think I shared you a photo that I had with Dean Ornish. I've had a couple of photos with him, a bit of a groupie. But anyway, he talks about the 4 things he thinks are important, and that's nutrition. So he talks about eating well, physical activity, moving more, he says, stress management, so stress less. And then his last one is to love more. And I actually find that one quite intriguing. In fact, I think I may have mentioned it about he actually wrote a book some time back called Love and Survival. And it's a really good read if you ever got a bit of a time over the break period. You might want to check it out. It's very, very good. And he shows all the science. He actually says that he thinks sort of love, social connectedness is probably the most important aspect of lifestyle medicine, which is pretty intriguing because there are others that would argue, like Corbel Esselstyn. He actually says that the only thing that matters is food, and the others are not important at all, don't play a role. And that's quite interesting. I actually have, he's an amazing character, Corbel Esselstyn, who did all the early studies. What's interesting about it is when you look at what he actually does with his group, his patients, it's very intense, and he gets them together once a week in the first instance, and then once a month to get together, and they all become like a family. And so even though he's talking about that, it's only about food, really he's supplying a lot of those other things that we've come to understand actually really matter a lot too. So anyway, we sort of started by looking at and saying that some of these luminaries in the space have come up with a range of different elements that, as they see it, in lifestyle medicine. But then we sort of distilled them down, or I sort of distilled them down to 7. And you might not agree that there are 7 and that it's not a good way to chunk them, and that's okay. You can argue that. But regardless, the task here was to actually look at your local environment and how, I know Etienne asked about how broad is local, and look, I don't mind how broad you actually go with your assignments. Even I think it was even asked, could we just do Australia? And I suppose, well, yeah, that's fine from my end. I think in the assignment, if you just sort of define quite clearly, though, what the scope of that you're looking at and how you're defining your population group, and then you can go from there. Anyway, so we came up with this. I sort of presented that I think that maybe there's 7 things that contribute to potentially to chronic disease. And a couple of years ago, probably 4 years ago now, Mel Renfrew, who some of you know, and in fact probably Mel will be making a bit more of it. She's a PhD student at the moment at Avondale, and she might be making a bit of an appearance in this course again next semester because she's done some great work. She actually came up with a little acronym, and I know that some of you have also come up with your own acronym. You emailed them to me, and I think they're really cool. I really like, one thing I really liked about Mel's one is that it was actually, everything was pitched in the positive. And so, as you know, her acronym was CAN STEP. And you know, she was implying that we can take steps in the right direction here. And that was through, C was connectedness, so social connectedness. A is activity, physical activity, clearly. N is nutrition, positive nutrition, putting in particular a plant slant to your diet. S was sleep and rest. T was temperance, so really looking at sort of mitigating substance use there. E was for environmental factors and contributors to chronic disease. And then P was about being psychologically positive. So yeah, I like the positivity behind it. Sometimes it's easier to cite in all the things people are doing wrong and make an acronym about that, but I just like that. And so that's why I gave it to you guys to play with. And if you can develop it and grow it, then that's great. I'd love to hear about that. I actually have an idea to one day do a paper on this, to actually sort of say, hey, look, there's been several authors that have had different idea about what the ingredients are, but how could we pull it together in a succinct way that sort of makes sense to people but still captures all the domains. Like even, for example, Ornish's stuff. Yeah, I'll say it now because I was going to bring it up later, but I think that there are a couple of things, and one thing in particular that he doesn't tap onto, and that's he talked about stress management, but he doesn't actually talk about what I believe to be a really crucial factor, and that is that whole sense of belonging, having a sense of purpose in life. I think that can be a real driver too, which plays into positive, you know, being psychologically positive, not just arresting the negative stuff by managing stress. So anyway, that was just my thoughts. What I'm actually going to open up to you guys, because I'd love to. I know that, you know, well, hopefully you've been working a fair bit on this, and you know, we have different backgrounds and we're coming from different contexts. So as I wrote my email I sent out to you today, I'm hoping that there's some people here that are willing to share and you know, have a bit of a chat about, this is what I think in my local area, this is the context of where I am, and this is what I see as probably the most pressing problems. But what I did observe something as I was going through the forums, something that that sort of jumped out to me, and I thought it was worth mentioning. And maybe I'll ask the question, like, out of those 7 things that we identified, which one do you think attracted the most amount of contribution in terms of posting? Which probably says something about, you know, how the extent to which we see this as important. Which one do you reckon it was? Anyone have a guess?
Connectedness.
So, connectedness. Are you looking at the post right now? Got the part.
No, I have Mel's acronym open in front of me.
Ah, there you go. I probably should have the acronym there too. Yeah, connectedness, activity, nutrition, sleep, rest, temperance, environment, and psychologically positive. And it was, you know, it was interesting that the most posting actually was all about connectedness. And I found that quite interesting. So there were actually 12 posts on that and 10 replies to those posts. So that was number one. The second one was nutrition, and that didn't probably come as a surprise to me, because this is the one that most people default to and think about. Interestingly enough, activity was one of the least represented. But so the top one was connectedness, second one was nutrition, and the third one was psychologically positive. So it was really interesting to me that there was a lot of attention just naturally given to the whole, you know, the psychological framework for it, which, you know, obviously connectedness contributes to in large part. So yeah, I found that quite interesting. What I find for me is really quite intriguing is over the years of, you know, going to lifestyle medicine conferences and watching this space evolve, that same thing has happened at conferences, I believe. Like, you still, every conference, well, it started off pretty much all talking about nutrition. And so it was very much a nutrition-driven space. And even like, you know, my good friend Dr. Hans Deal, who developed the CHIP program, I remember when we were upgrading the CHIP program, he used to just constantly be giving me the speech. He's going, Darren, remember CHIP is a nutrition-driven program. And so there's very, very strong emphasis on nutrition. And and rightly so, because obviously we know, nutrition drives, the development of chronic disease in a powerful way, or the healing of chronic disease in a powerful way. But what I've seen is, and activity's always been hanging around. So everyone's always talking about exercise, but for some reason, exercise is not something we get that animated about. We know it's important. No one's going to debate that. We all know that, pretty much how we should be just moving more. I love Di Westaway's take on it. She talks about, move lots, do a bit of huffing and puffing, and lift stuff. And that's how she sums up the take. I said to her, that Michael Pollan's I don't know if Di's with us today. I'm not talking about her behind her back. No, she's not on at the moment. Michael Pollan's book, In Defence of Food, and the little slogan that he has, which I think is gold, which just says, eat food, real food, not too much, mostly plants. And that sort of sums up everything we know about nutrition. I sort of was going to say to Di, why don't you write your own book? And I reckon you've just got the same little succinct thing, move lots, a little bit of puffing, and lift stuff. That probably sums up all, that activity. So lifestyle medicine historically has been very much driven by nutrition. Physical activities, hangs around on the periphery a bit. But over time, I've just seen it become more and more emphasis being placed on the whole, psychosocial, positive psychology aspects of it. And that intrigues me. And I think that the reason for that is that in some ways, people's nutrition and their eating patterns, that it is influenced by environment. So environment obviously has a big part to play. But a lot of the times, the way we eat and what we eat is influenced by how we feel, and our psychological state. And everyone knows this to be the case. As they say, the world is full of people who know what to do but just don't do what they know. And the reason often they don't do what they know is because they don't feel like it. It's pretty simple. I feel like eating chocolate and I don't feel like eating broccoli. And so therefore, I think that what we're starting to recognise is things like, and so then you ask the question, to step back a bit. So why aren't I feeling so great? Well, maybe it's because I'm socially isolated. Dean Ornish has this classic comment. He talks about smoking, and smoking he says, is sort of almost an end result. And he said he became aware of that when one day he was talking about smoking cessation, and he was working with a patient, and the patient said to him, he goes, hey, he says, he shakes his pack of cigarettes. He goes, I've got 25 friends in here. You take them away from me, and what have I got? And so, and Dean Ornish said he sort of realised that, hey, this is why, things like social isolation and lack of connectedness, they're sort of more upstream, but they then spill down and have an effect on all these other behaviours that we know are super important, like eating patterns and activity and substance use. But yeah, stepping back, these sort of psychosocial determinants become increasingly important. And what I think, I'm predicting here, but I actually think then this is an aspect of sort of being psychologically positive. I'm seeing at conferences there's increasing amount of talk about things like adverse childhood experiences. And in fact, I know Zoe posted some stuff on that, and we spoke a bit about that on the forum. But what I think we're starting to is we're increasingly moving further upstream to see what are the cause of the causes. What are the root determinants of why people may be socially isolated. And then which then flows onto this. And I actually have a really strong sense that probably the most important thing that we can be doing for people is actually giving them a sense of, what do we know with adverse childhood experiences, for example? It just robs people of self-worth and, their belief that, they're lovable and that they deserve, positive things in life. So I have a feeling that we're going to hear more and more, and this is what Gary Eggers has moved towards, that which intrigues me. Remember, he's, nasty odours with malice. That malice is, that sense of meaningless, sense of alienation, loss of identity and culture, which is mediated through these adverse childhood experiences. And I think I think in time we're going to see more and more increasing emphasis placed on that as perhaps the most upstream determinant of chronic disease. And in that being the case, then we really need to be addressing that as well, which is, I don't think there's simple fixes for those things, but giving people a sense of sense of value, sense of worth, sense of belonging, sense of purpose and contribution. And maybe at the end of the day, when you look at all the the positive psychology literature, I really like the idea that what they come up with is that pretty much just people need a sense of meaning in life, and they talk about that as having a sense as coming from having a sense of belonging to and contributing to or serving something bigger than yourself. And so I find that really intriguing. Hey, what do you guys reckon? I'm going to open up to you guys for a bit, and then I'm going to invite a few of you, whoever would like, to share their perspective on how they rated what they thought was the most important things, important elements within their local community. What's your thought on that? Does anyone sort of feel that this whole idea of maybe in the people you've even dealt with that are struggling with chronic conditions, that maybe stepping back, there are these it's often lack of connectedness or lack of belonging or purpose or psychologically positive. Mary, go, take yourself off.
I'm doing the Central Coast in New South Wales.
Yeah.
We have a higher rate of mental health issues, suicide, and higher psychological distress than the rest of New South Wales, and also higher numbers of divorced, separated, widowed and elderly people. We have the second highest incidence of diabetes, and nearly 70% of the population is overweight or obese.
Nearly 70% on the Central Coast.
Yeah. So to me, it goes hand in hand. I can see it. I've spent so much time researching the numbers.
Yeah.
That I don't have much time to write the essay. It was funny how it just all kind of started with one, and then you could see the domino effect.
Yes.
So I find exactly what you're talking about, that connectedness, just that the fact that the median age is 42 compared to Sydney where it's 36. There's a lot of elderly people, and just the fact that there's so many divorced and separated people as well living here.
What's interesting, by all accounts, you visit the Central Coast, and if you didn't know the socioeconomic groupings and that, it's a beautiful part of the world to live.
That's it. And that's the thing. It offers a really attractive lifestyle. An incredibly attractive lifestyle. Yeah, but and affordable housing, for example, compared to Sydney, but it's not really reflected in the health of the people.
I was just going to ask, how is that so? Because I'm agreeing. I live on the Central Coast myself, and I see, there's definitely downtown, but there's also uptown, and then there's beaches, and there's I find that a really staggering position for it to have within the state, considering what we're up against. I think of some other communities in New South Wales that aren't so.
Yeah. Where are you, Erin?
Lisaro.
Okay, not far away.
What about yourself?
Oh, we should catch up. I'm at Avoca.
Ah,
yeah.
Yeah, but you walk down the beach at Avoca or Main Street and you think, how could we possibly have that position?
Yeah, but then I work in Tuggerah and I see the flip side.
Yeah.
So we have, it's a whole different demographic, a lot of health issues, chronic health issues, overweight people, obesity, a lot of divorce, drug use, smoking. It's just like a different state almost, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's funny. You just think about what we're up against, and no offense to, I don't know, Kempsey, it just came to my mind, but I work at Gosford Hospital, so we see a real cross section, I guess there too. But that's we're not even the middle of the ballpark. We're actually one of the leading. It's kind of a bad claim to fame.
However, the kids here eat healthier than a lot of the other kids in New South Wales, and also exercise more. So maybe the next generation will improve the stats. So there's some positives.
The kids, yeah. So that's interesting. What's driving that? Is that the schools that are, because it is a sporty area. Like there's plenty of opportunities for sport and activity, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know how the government gave out the vouchers for sports?
Yeah.
So they're being used. So my neighbour is the head of OzTag in New South Wales, and I asked her, are they using the vouchers or are they just, because I've used them maybe a couple of times, and she said, yeah, people who never would have done sports are actually signing up to sports with the vouchers. So they're helping. So that's a good thing. I didn't know that.
You know, this afternoon, I had a couple of hours off, and my brother and I, who's also a lecturer here, we love kite surfing. It was a good nor'easter blowing today. So we all went, the two of us went down.
Our schools, in our, lack of taxing of, I don't know.
Yeah. Is it a lot of, and why is the divorce rate so high? And a lot of divorced and separated people on the coast. Why is that?
And did they move here and then get divorced?
Yeah.
Or were they divorced and so they retreated to the coast?
Like, you remember those? I don't know.
Yeah. But you remember those Adventist studies, Darren, and you were saying, do people become Adventists because they believe in the health message, or are they normally, is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
So
on the positive side, drug use has stabilised. It actually went down a little bit around 2013, and then it stabilised. And so has domestic violence. That's actually also in all of New South Wales has receded a bit. So, and it's stabilised in the coast also. So, I mean, you got to see the positive in that, I suppose.
This is one of the thing. This one of the reasons I wanted to do this assignment or two reasons. One is because lifestyle medicine is really broad, and at least in this sort of unit called lifestyle medicine, past, present, future, we've got clarity on what we're talking about when we're talking about lifestyle medicine, and it is very multifactorial. So I just wanted to touch on those things, and we haven't dived into depth on any of those things because we do that in other units. But one thing, you think, for example, if you're in a position now of a policymaker, and you were tasked with the job of actually influencing change within that community, and this, some people, this is their job, to try and go, all right, what's the most strategic thing we could do to make a positive contribution here? And you look at it and you think, wow, there's stuff everywhere. I think this is what I want to get you sort of thinking. What would you do? I mean, what would be the first thing that you think might, actually have an impact on several things potentially? Have you given thought to that yet?
Well, I looked up the government's plans, because they have a plan. The Goal 3 plan is a well-connected community and attractive lifestyle. That's their goal, one of their goals. But it doesn't really say much in there.
Yes.
It's very waffly. Waffle. It's supplying housing. It's opening new centres where people can meet, I suppose, and get support. I suppose that's something. But yeah, I'm really stuck on that question as to what action would you take. I wouldn't have a clue. I'm not a politician. I'm not really sure what you mean. I was going to ask you actually what you mean by that question. You says describes an actionable idea for reducing the prevalence of chronic conditions. I mean, that's a whole essay in itself, I suppose.
It is, and obviously you've only got a short few hundred words to identify. But I suppose the idea is looking at that big picture, and it's a bit terrifying and overwhelming to look at the big picture. But is there one particular thing that, and look, sometimes there isn't, but what would be the thing that you would actually go after that potentially might have a bit of a flow-on effect to some of these other issues that are occurring as well? So you don't have to tell me now.
I don't know. I just know that my 3 focus areas would be connectedness, obviously nutrition because of the obesity, and activity.
Yes.
So I don't know. I was hoping that someone would tell me tonight.
Maybe so. Well, and look, and there's no right or wrong answers to it either.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But like education is obviously number one. I'm an educator, so you can't. But education can't do everything. You know, I just went to a seminar recently about mental health, and you know, this guy who was fabulous, actually done a PhD in mental health and how to deal with it amongst adolescents. And he had the child in the middle, and then he had all the different support mechanisms for that child, you know, like family, community, hospitals, schools, etc., sporting stuff. And he said if you expand one of those, like for example, school, if we help that child like more than we should, what happens to the other ones is they shrink. So they don't do as much, you know. And I see this firsthand every day. Like for an example, if you teach the child to tie their shoelaces, right? That takes away the job from the home, tying the shoelaces. So they just go, oh no, well the school would do that, so we're not going to bother with that. So, and I've just found that really interesting. So whilst we can do a lot as educators, where do we put the limit?
Yeah.
You know, it's who's doing what in the community. So it's such a complicated issue.
Can I just say something there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I notice in the community they have various activities like, you know, the men's shed. I don't know if you have that up in New South Wales.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we have the men's shed and various things that people can go and join. And, you know, my experience is I've taught for many years. The main thing I used to do was teach on unemployment programs, and it was mostly long-term unemployed people, you know, like in Dandenong. I don't know if you know much about Dandenong in Melbourne, but there's a lot of abused people and drug users and all of that, and you know, you're trying to help them find work. But what I found is that, you know, sure, you can provide all these activities, and people who can self-manage will go and join those sorts of activities. But the type of people that I used to have in my unemployment programs weren't people who came there by choice. They were forced to come, otherwise they would lose their doll. So my thoughts are that people who don't have initiative have to be plucked or pushed to do these activities so that they are feeling connected and that they can be educated and learn maybe self-management skills. But I don't know, to me, to a point, self-management is inherent. You've either got it or you haven't, or you might be able to be taught, but there is that X amount of people, and it's a huge group that cannot self-manage, and then they just end up being homeless. That's the bottom of it, isn't it? So to me, it's like, how do you create like a safety net where people like that are caught? And it's hard.
What do you guys reckon about so Georgie, you've said that you think that some people, that self-management, it's almost a bit of self-efficacy, isn't it, as well? Would you say? Is that innate? Is that inherent, or is it something that can be taught?
I've got 2 cents.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, like I think, to be honest, like I think a lot of people who are in a difficult situation, we're just assuming that they're ready to take that plunge and get the help that they need and access these services. But we're sort of missing the point of, you know, if you think of that trans-theoretical model, where not everyone is ready for change. Like there's only like 20% of us at any one time who's actually ready to make changes. So really need to work more on that ambiguous, like the pros and cons of joining the men's shed, or the pros and cons of connecting with your local services. Like I think that sort of social marketing aspect is a really big missed opportunity to try and get people in to want to access help.
Yeah,
and also, Darren, I'd just like to say I really hated ranking these. It was like a really big complicated web in my mind, and I was like, no, it's a web, Darren, it's a web, it's not a rank. I don't know if anyone else experienced the same thing.
No, that's true, and it's very, very true. And in fact, I mean, once again, Gary Eger talks very much as this is a systems approach, you know, and the idea that when you start to change people's eating patterns, then nutrition starts to instantly change. I suppose why I did that mean thing to you to make it try and make it is thinking on these lines of what would be the first one I'd go after, you know, in terms of potentially to get the biggest bang for the buck. To once again come back, if you're a policymaker, what would be the first thing you would initiate? You know, would it be a nutrition program? Would it be a men's shed? Hey, you know, anyone else got any thoughts on that? It's a good thought. All right. Well, has anyone got any other parts of the world that you come from? I know we're all from different places, and you have some good insights about whereabouts you're from and what you see as the unique challenges there.
If anyone's got any action plans, I'm listening.
Alicia, you about to say something?
Yeah, well, I guess just like what Bill was saying, it's actually very difficult to rank them because the wheel has already been invented within my community. That's how I see it. And I think I have to go one step deeper, like what Marit has done, in doing an extra survey or research to perhaps just get me 2 or 3 that I could perhaps, rather than rank them, put in a web or a systems approach. So since the day you've given us the task to create an acronym, I love acronyms, and I had 3 or more. But the thing is, I couldn't, at the moment I'm working on fitness, which is fitness, F for fitness, which is the physical activity part of it. I is for insight, which is the positively, psychologically positive. And then the T is for temperance, N is for nutrition, E is for environment, S is for social, I'd like to put the sleep first before the S, which is the connectedness, social network. So fitness, but the thing is, I don't know how quite to rank that, because where I am at the moment, I know that fitness, I know a lot of linear walks, I know there's a lot of parks open so that cycling is available, walking groups around the area, both for the young and for the old. And so perhaps I will just have to add research, extra research that Marit has done, whether a small community that I belong to would have, they may not have fitness as the number 1 though. So that's my dilemma. So.
That's good. I like it. Yeah. And yeah, you know, I think, Val, you've raised a good question now. I realise it was a lousy assignment. No, I'm already joking. Hey, Belle, out of interest though, because you're in a workplace and your role is almost to do this, isn't it? Like in some ways, where have you gone?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're sort of doing it on in terms of I mean, it's a fairly significant number of people, but is this sort of always something you're doing in your head anyway? And then
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, just a bit of background. So I look after the health and wellbeing program of the Light and Easy employees. So we've got 5 sites across Australia, about 1,500 employees with a super ethnically diverse and generally lower socioeconomic sort of background. So no, it's always on my mind, like in terms of, you know, we've all got limited resources, time, money to put into things. And so I'm constantly thinking like, is this the best bang for buck? But yeah, like, to be honest, it's one of those things where you sometimes wonder whether you just bang your head against a brick wall or whether maybe it does make a difference. Like, you know, like, but ultimately, you know, yeah, like obviously working for a healthy food company, like nutrition is always pretty at the forefront, which is handy because we do have some pretty amazing things for our staff. But it always comes back to, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make a drink. Like, we have literally so many things for our employees, and you'd think that they were literally, you know, some sort of pin-up poster girls and boys for health and wellness, but it's certainly not the case. Like, so that's a little bit frustrating too, because you sort of think so many other workplaces offer next to nothing, or things which are flash in the pan strategies aren't there sort of year in, year out. So yeah, that's one of my many challenges.
It is. Hey, you mentioned there you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, and this is so true. I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges we face. What drives that then? You know, what is it? Do you guys? Is it people they don't just see the value, or they don't believe they can do it, or what's your thought?
I think the barrier sometimes with offering things in the workplace is people are often going to be like, what's the company going to do with this information? Like, I think there's always that level of hesitation or maybe lack of trust. But I do think it comes a lot down to that principle. I think you might have had like a neat little visual of that confidence, like 8 out of 10. Yes. To change, and is it not motivation? What was the other thing? Confidence and
basically the importance to you.
Yeah, it has to be important to someone, and you know, I guess a lot of our people are only just above the breadline. So for me to go into them and go and say like, hey, you should really give up your cancer sticks, like that's, as you said, like that's the sort of, you know, the tool to help get them through the day or their stresses. It's sort of redundant to talk about, you know, the importance of, you know, 7 hours of sleep, this, that, the other, if they're really struggling financially to even just put food on the table.
Yeah, I find
that too. Sorry, just to sort of keep on hogging the airways. Like, you know, I think that there's a really increased focus on mental health, but I think like, again, that stress of mental health, like, yes, there's always depression, anxiety, but I think that money-driven anxiety is something which like also needs to sort of be coming under that like umbrella of well-being, because so many people are wearing, you know, huge credit card debts, mortgage debts to the eyeballs, and like just not having those good financial skills in order to, I guess, not be in that situation if they are, how best to manage and get out of it is, you know, keeps people awake at night.
Yeah, so like I go to some of these conferences and I've actually heard people debating on, you know, we really should be pushing organic broccoli as compared to, you know, normal broccoli. And I'm thinking, people, you know, and the reality is that when someone's stressing about how they're going to pay their, you know, electricity bill, the last thing on their mind or that they're interested in or importance to them is, you know, whether I'm eating organic or not. Like, come on. So, you know, it comes back to those, you know, you mentioned the economics, and I think that this is a really important contributor. We know it's important contributor to wellbeing. But, Marit, you know, on the Central Coast, I'd be very interested. One thing, I don't know if you guys have come across the book, The Spirit Level, and it looks at essentially in a country, the greater the social disparity in terms of income, in terms of, you know, particularly income, it carries over to every other metric. And so in countries that have that bigger disparity, that bigger gap, they actually do worse in terms of their health outcomes. They have more, you know, incarceration. They have, everything goes worse for them. And it's quite interesting that some countries, like, you know, like I know in Japan, I think the CEO is not allowed to earn like 40 times more than the base level worker, which, I mean, 40 times sounds a lot, but it's not like in, you know, some countries, some of these, like even Australia, where you hear about these bankers getting, you know, $32 million bonuses because the CEO just got that for whatever. What I'd be interested to know is, you know, you mentioned the Central Coast does very poorly as a region. My gut sense is that in the Central Coast, within that region, there is actually a pretty big disparity there. You've actually got some very wealthy, but also some very low socioeconomic as well.
Yeah, I dare say you're right. I've tried to find some figures on that, but it's really hard to pin down the suburbs, like where I live, like Tavoca, Terrigal, Wombrel kind of area. It's there's no stats that I can find anyway on those. But yeah, you could see it just with your naked eye, really, walking around. You know, look at people, the fitness level, that people are running and eating healthily, and etc. So yeah, there was another thing that I thought of when Belle was talking is that so for example with connectedness, if your action plan was something about getting groups, organising groups and the man shed, etc., people don't leave their homes. Like, it's comfortable to sit on the couch. I mean, I find even like I go to a book club, right, which is tomorrow night, and I think, oh, yeah, I've only half read the book, and I might just chill tomorrow night. Like, sometimes it's just actually really hard to get out of the house. So for all good intentions, you're creating these groups and networks, etc. I don't know, do people want to go? Will people get off the couch? Like, how can we get people to connect when we are so sedentary and so attached? We don't even go to the movies anymore. We just watch everything on TV, So I just thought of that with Belle. It's the same sort of thing. Like, why eat broccoli, when you're struggling just to pay the bills?
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, with the, what were you talking about? Oh yeah, there's definitely pockets of really wealthy areas. Do you know who that researcher was that you mentioned? I'll just look that up. That researcher.
It's actually a book. It was a book. It's called The Spirit Level. I can't remember the name of the author of it.
Yeah, that's all right.
Quite interesting.
And I was wondering if anyone else had found in their area that connectedness is the main driver for chronic diseases.
Good question.
Anyone else found that? No?
Aaron, can you say something? Go.
Yeah, sorry. Are
you ironing?
I turned my video off so I could do my ironing.
Love it. You iron away, you make me feel guilty.
Yeah, so I'm doing mine on cancer nursing. Statistically fascinating in terms of how much more successful a patient is going to be with their treatment or compliant with treatment if they're involved in support networks. And it talks about like metastatic breast patients, if they've got a weekly support group, like the stats around that. It talks about if you have a spouse, you're 12% more likely to be alive in 5 years' time than someone without. Like, just, yeah, crazy in terms of that. I think there's some really interesting reasons why, and it talks about like enhanced immune function, and those who are socially connected have improved levels of natural, like, cytotoxic T killer cells. Like, the immunocompetence can be raised even in the carer of someone who's having cancer, and not just the patient themselves. And then it talks about, socially, is the reason because they have a reason to live now, or is it because they've got access to transport to get to their appointments, or because they've got someone there reminding them to take their tablets at 8 a.m. Yeah, some fascinating stuff, particularly in the land of cancer patients, about how important connectedness is.
Yeah, I think that what's coming through loud and strong, it's not just behavioural. It's not just that, people are more inclined to follow through on their behaviours because they got their partner prompting them or that support group encouraging them. Physiologically, there are changes, as you're saying, that, we can see in immunosurveillance and some of these other biomarkers. It's having a direct physiological effect, which is pretty amazing.
So Darren, you know how we're talking about connectiveness. You know about what's this, the Blue Zones thing by Dan? He talks about these these intersecting lifestyle behaviors, and he refers to them as the Power 9. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, are they the 9 factors he outlines in his book, or?
Yes. And interestingly, out of the 9 factors, 3 of them deal with connectivity, 3 of them deal with nutrition, and only 1 deals with activity. So again, even with longevity, looking at longevity, connectiveness plays a very important part in having a healthy lifestyle that leads to a longer, healthier, happier life.
That's very interesting. It's actually, I hadn't done that count before. What I do remember as an exercise buff is the first thing he said, and it's not, and I imagine it's not ranked in order, but his number one was move naturally. And I actually really like the way he says that, because it's not saying to run marathons, it's just saying in your everyday activity, you know, move in natural ways, very functional ways. So, yeah, but you're right. So there are three of them then, because, I mean, he talks about, you know, putting a plant slant to your diet. What were the other ones?
Yeah. So plant slant, he says to actually drink a particular type of wine, the 80% rule. So that's the 3 for nutrition.
Yes.
And for connectiveness, it was a sense of belonging, your loved ones first, and find the right tribe. I love that one.
Right tribe, yeah. Yeah, your tribe makes a big difference, that's for sure. Hey, has anyone got any their part of the world they'd love to share about?
I was just going to pipe in again, just back to Marit's point, just about the connectedness. What I found really interesting about doing the research is that it's really easy to find reports which will, in the one place, document, you know, the rates of smoking, alcohol, physical activity, obesity. Like, it's all very nicely captured in terms of these classic chronic disease factors. However, it's like, what? Connectedness? Like, no, that's got nothing to do with it. Like, it's even the connectedness is disconnected in terms of like all these chronic disease factors, which I think is just really, I guess, symptomatic of how we treat health in more broadly, in terms of our, you know, local, state, Australia sort of level. So I think, you know, we are a probably select few who think of it this way, but it's important.
Yeah. Thank you. Go, Erin.
Just on that, I remember myself even thinking how much more attracted I was to the CHIP idea being run at church at the function centre there, as opposed to Forgive to Live and Depression Recovery Program. So those two programs attracted much less interest because they had to do with the connectedness rather than CHIP, which was, I guess, more programmed towards diet. And I'm even someone who's interested in health. So I think, yeah, from a community point of view, how important do they see it? And yeah, just the disparity there.
That's a good observation. It's sometimes interesting just to look at numbers. You know, the numbers, what people naturally do or what they gravitate towards, you know, speaks a lot of volumes. And you're right, with, you know, you're looking at what sort of programs are popular, what do people go to. It says about what they value is important. Hey guys, we've got about 5 minutes left. Has anyone got anything they'd like to share before I wrap it up?
I'm up in the North Coast area. I'm plenty behind on this assignment, but the stats that I've been looking at are similar. In the up around Lismore, the number one perceived health need is all about mental health, with over a third of the population saying that that's the main health challenge they have. And the second priority is people's concern about their weight. The data I have doesn't specifically mention connectedness either, but yeah, all the things that people have been mentioning, I would think are primary drivers of that. Both, I think a sense of meaning for people, which is usually derived through their connectedness, both to the people around them, their family, a sense of connection to their values. I think there's a lot of people who, and you probably get this discrepancy both in the wealthy and the poor, but I think there's people who have it somehow arrive at a point where they're disconnected from what their actual values are, either through pursuit of what they thought they valued, and they arrive there and they're like, well, that's not really where I want to be, because, you know, in my work I see people who don't lack for money yet aren't overly happy at one end of the spectrum, and then there's certainly probably more people at the other end of the spectrum where both financial pressures, but a lot of messed up family social pressures mean that they're just not in the right space to be addressing any of the other lifestyle medicine type factors in their lives. So they've got uncontrolled diabetes and, you know, pretty much any and every other kind of manifestation of a poor lifestyle is rampant in them because of their lack of a sense of value and meaning in their life, and they can't really adhere to what they know they should do and what you tell them to, and until they gain that, I think.
You know what, I think, and that this is a good place to conclude. I think I just, the more I'm in this space, the more I think that to be the case. You know, people just innately need that and are searching for that. And if you can link them, you know, to their values, link them to a sense of belonging, link them to a sense of contribution, that they're, you know, that they're making a difference and they've got a part to play.
How do you achieve that though? In our, I guess. I'm very familiar with, in myself, being driven by a convenience to some degree, and, you know, I want it now, I want it here now, and these kind of things that, like, the things I imagine, again, I don't have data on this, but the things I imagine that drive some of this lack of meaning and disconnectedness are very much have their roots in things that happened a long time ago, and to make change, actually, you're looking, you know, decades or even generations down the track to make major changes.
Yeah, I'm hearing and I agree. I actually think there's a lot to be learned though coming out of the positive psychology space in this and where they're very intentional about doing things like strength assessments on people. You know, so you identify what are your signature strengths, and, you know, generally people have, you know, one or more of them, and then you know, getting intentional about people, even if it's volunteering or using those signature strengths in a way that sort of contributes in some positive way. There's a lot of research coming out now showing that seems to do people wonders in terms of, certainly in terms of their psychological status. So yeah, I mean, look, it's, you know, this is the whole challenging, massive world of it. It's there are no, you know, surefire responses and solutions to it all. But yeah, I think what you said is I do believe, I think that many people are lacking that really strong sense of meaning, you know, strong sense of purpose, belonging, contribution, and, you know, maybe. And that might be something that's been, you know, due to trauma, you know, and I definitely think that plays into it at times. But then even, you know, like all the studies like on, you know, we know, for example, as soon as a man retires, he's about 6 times more inclined to experience depression, and, you know, health outcomes become very, very adverse. And so what we know is that, you know, for guys, linking them into contributing into groups and all that actually, you know, that there's been a lot of work done showing that's the value of that. So yeah, I don't know all the answers to it for sure, but yeah, my gut sense is that, you know, people really, they need that. I actually feel for people who, you know, are isolated, I wonder whether, to what extent it's not just the isolation, but also that they don't, you know, they don't feel that lack of, that feel that sense of purpose and meaning in their life. You know, in Japan, which is obviously in Okinawa, which is one of the areas, the blue zones, which is often spoken about, you know, very large number of people that live to 100, and there's been the centenarian studies done on them. One of the things they talk, I think it's Dan Buettner once again, it talks about this, is one of the things that they all have as they get older is their ikigai, and that's essentially their reason for being. And they talk very openly and freely about this. This is very, you know, it's articulated amongst the family that, you know, that grandma, her ikigai is this, and, you know, and so it gives her a sense of, you know, well, it's meaning, sense of purpose, you know, belonging to this family unit. We're very faction right now, aren't we? I mean, our communities where, you know, I think about, you know, probably going back, you know, a few generations ago, we all sort of would grow up in the same area. I mean, I come from a very working class background, and pretty much all my family, they just lived in the one area. And I felt like a bit of a prodigal son. Like, you know, I was the one who went off to university 3 hours away, and that was a pretty big deal, really. I wasn't going to be living at home, and then you move into state, and I mean, this is just commonplace now. I think it's probably having a lot bigger toll on us than what we recognise, and trying to recreate those connections and give people, that reason for being, that ikigai, probably goes a long way.
That was perfect ending because I just thought of an action.
Oh, good.
Because it just what you said then, it fits perfectly with the coast because we actually work less hours here. There's fewer people working full time, more people working part time, possibly higher unemployment rate. I have to check that. But that makes sense. So if you don't work as much, so I know that, all of us are working full time, we're studying, we've got all sorts of commitments, so we haven't got many hours left in the day, but we're actually quite connected. So I'm thinking like that, creating job opportunities and creating work is so important, and that sort of makes sense now with the New South Wales government side because that's one of the actions to make a more connected community. So yeah, that actually sits really well with the coast, what you just said.
Very good. Very good. Glad we could all be of help. Hey guys, I think it's time to wrap it up. But hey, I just want to say thanks for the semester and good luck with these assignments. You should be your last one now, and so I look forward to reading them and getting your perspectives on what you think needs to happen in your part of the world. And hey, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, because you're going to have all this free time over the next few months before semester one starts, you might like to even try and action this great idea that you have for but anyway, now I will be a couple of things. I will be sending out an evaluation for the unit, and look, we love honest feedback and appraisal. So let us know what's worked for you and what you've enjoyed and what hasn't, what we can improve. Any ideas for making your experience all the better? We're always up for. And the other thing too, I seriously would like to, I'm going to keep trying to think about some way that we might be able to connect in the real company of each other. And I know that's going to be hard for some of us because we live quite far away, but we'll keep on working towards that because it would be good. I think it'd really add to it if we could, get to spend, a little bit of time together, even if it wasn't on lifestyle medicine stuff all the time. It's really good to be able to connect with people because connectedness is important, as we all know. So anyway, good chatting with you, and we'll be in contact. I'll be sending some emails and stuff around. But if I don't get to talk to you personally, I hope you have a great Christmas. Stay safe. Josh, are you not in fire zone? I look at these maps and it just scares me a bit.
Yeah, we're all good at the moment. It's probably 30 k's or so from where we are. Yeah, I'm not expecting anything too concerning, but there's lots of smoke. There's
smoke everywhere. Well, they've actually just today, this at Avondale, the Coorambong school, they've called school off tomorrow. So apparently tomorrow is meant to be a bit of a wild one. So bunker down, people. I cleaned my gutters out this morning in anticipation. So stay safe. Have a great break, and I'll be corresponding with you anyway. But if we don't get to chat before next semester, hope you have a great break, friends. See ya.